Hi, and welcome to the Greenhouse Doctor at Greenhouse Stories, where I share with you some of my experiences in the greenhouse, the garden, and with aquaponics, and some of my experiments and consequently some mistakes, from which come some ideas that will help us together grow some of our own food. Let's take a look at today's topic. Today we're talking about growing more crayfish or yabbies in a limited space in the aquaponics system. Now it's related to the first of 3 aquaponic systems I've set up in rapid succession, and it is the first and simplest of the 3 systems, and I'll introduce you to that. It's not directly connected to the greenhouse at the moment. The other 2 systems are, but today we're more focused on the fact that we want to grow more yabbies or more crayfish in a limited space. Let's have a look. So here is the aquaponics system. These are the tubes in which the plants are being planted into, and you'll see it's a pretty routine setup. You might have seen lots of these on your views in YouTube. So the water returns just via this black hose, comes through here, through the piping system. The pipes are arranged so that the water flows in a convoluted shape and returns to the tank, which is over here. The tank is just an old rainwater tank, 1,000-litre rainwater tank, with a big hole cut through the top of it so that we can access and utilize it for the purpose of the aquaponics. Now I'm not too concerned at the moment with the plants. The plants are doing okay. This is the second lot of plantings. Previously I had some plants in there. They weren't doing too well, possibly owing to the fact that the system was very new and I wasn't feeding the yabbies very much, and so they weren't getting as much of the nitrates and the nutrients they needed to grow. This is the second lot of plantings. Again, not too concerned about it at the moment. The plants are being utilized to remove the nitrates from the system. I will return to that later on when the system is more established to get the plantings right. But let's look at the other parts of the system. So very simple, just a rain tank, big hole cut in the top, wire mesh for the top to protect from birds and other predators, with the hinge so that I can easily access and also prevent some of the yabbies from crawling out. Now to the topic in hand, growing more yabbies in a small space. Now I've been viewing some of the other author videos on YouTube, and many of them have grown yabbies in a relatively shallow arrangement, whereby it's rather more ornamental rather than practical for the purposes of raising many to eat. Many of us will know that yabbies and crayfish in general are cannibals. They will prey on each other and diminish the population of the system if given time and access to their fellow inhabitants. One of the authors has stated that in a small area, perhaps a 1 meter square area, you could only raise perhaps 2 to 4 yabbies or crayfish. If you look at this tank, it is approximately 1 meter in diameter. So even if it was a square, it would be only about 1 meter square in surface area. And so growing 2 or 4 yabbies, that's not going to really help if you were wanting to eat the crayfish or the yabbies. Mathematically, let's have a look. I mean, if you had a family of 4, and yabbies and crayfish not particularly big, so you might eat 10 yabbies per individual, and so a family of 4 would eat 40, and so in an area like this, 2 to 4 yabbies to take to maturity is not going to cut it in regards to feeding the family, even for one meal, let alone once every few weeks, or even twice or 4 times a year. Now, before I continue, I want to paste in some snippets of some of the images of the yabbies that I've got in the system. To give you an idea, introduce you to the blue claw yabby here in Australia. We also have the red claw, but I'm not using those at the moment. And we also have marron here in Australia. Again, that I'm going to talk about the marron in another video. But the blue claw, Chirex destructor, and in other countries obviously you have various other crayfish, but the behaviors, particularly cannibalism, is much the same. So for those who are unfamiliar, a couple of snippets so that we familiarize ourselves with the characteristics and behavior that's important in the raising of these yabbies. So here is our friend, the blue claw yabby, or the common yabby, Chirex destructor. Here is a buried female yabby, the term referring to the eggs on her abdomen looking like berries. She can carry between 200 to in excess of 400 eggs in this way, and release them as young into the water once they have matured. Here are a number of juveniles in close proximity to each other, all from the same female, all from the same batch of eggs, very different in sizes, as you can see. Some maturing much faster, undergoing many cycles of molting, and others much slower. Deeper, you see even more of them, and they're all around. More of them there, very small juveniles there. So a female can carry 200 to 400 or more eggs, and so consequently from one female you can derive a very large population of yabbies or crayfish. There are the claws of some larger members. As you can see, I'm going to see if I could move this and get you to appreciate. There we go, some more of them. And not only that, but some small juveniles in between them, floating and sitting on this net, cohabitating quite well right there. What you see here is a yabby holding on to what looks like the shell of a molted yabby. So from those videos, snippets, you can see that inherently the crayfish and yabbies are cannibals. Now that's one of the most important things we have to address when raising them in large numbers in a small area, because they will diminish their own population by simply eating each other until essentially the last one exists. Now, as I said, other authors that have presented videos have often presented them in a shallow arrangement with some tubes as hides or housing for the yabbies, and these are probably inadequate for raising large numbers. The yabbies themselves, when they are mature and when they have their shells, their hard shells, they're relatively resilient and can defend themselves and evade cannibalism. However, like many crustaceans, they do shed their shell in the process of molting and growing bigger. So and in doing so, in the time when they shed their shell until the time when their new shell hardens, they are more susceptible to predation. And here you can see an example of a shedded shell or molted shell. Now, the important thing is that I very much thought originally that the yabbies would find themselves a small place to hide and shed their shells in there and be protected in that way. Now, I've thought about it since, and there are two issues with that. One, in a small confined space, they will not be able to struggle out, do effectively what is a Houdini act, and get out of the straitjacket that is their old shell. So in a confined space they'll have trouble with that, and I've noticed that a lot of the yabbies that molt, they come to the surface and they leave the shells, and that's why I've got this shell as an example, and the other shell that you saw that the other yabby was taking and eating. So they actually prefer reasonably open space to execute this molting procedure, because they need to get out of their old shell, so they can't be in a confined space. That's one. And secondly, if they are in a confined space, if we think about it, in a tube for example, then if they are cornered on either side by their fellow inhabitants, then they have no way of escape. Now I've noticed also in this particular arrangement that even though their shell is soft when they molt, they still have the ability to kick their tail and actually evade capture in that way. So they have some defenses, but they need space to get away, and that's the important thing. So really what we need to do is to create some sort of segregation, separation, so that the fellow members do not have the opportunity to easily get to them. So how do we achieve a large number of yabbies in the one space without them cannibalizing each other? Well, the answer I believe is in utilizing the entire water column, so the entire space in the tank. So this involves effectively vertical integration, or effectively high-rise living, to utilize the rest of the water column and separate many of the members. So how do we achieve this? Let's start with the bottom. So at the bottom, what I've got is a reasonably thick layer of scoria or lava stone or volcanic rock. Now, lava stone is highly porous. It has this porosity, microporosity in it, and that in itself is very good to allow beneficial bacteria to inhabit and help with the nitrogen cycle and removing the waste from the system. Now, this system of mine is a very rudimentary system. It does not have a solid lift outlet. It does not have a separate sump or a radial flow settler. So all of the filtration, all the beneficial bacteria have to reside entirely in this system. So that helps with that. That's the base. Now, not only that, but that creates contour and topography for the very young juveniles in the times when they are very small. They can hide in the small gaps that are created by the spaces between the small rocks. And then on top of that, you can start adding a few things. Broken bricks. Now, you find these at a building site, broken bricks, and you lay them all around, and in doing, you create larger voids and places where larger yabbies and crayfish can potentially hide. So if you can imagine a lot of the floor covered in that, and then to this you can add broken slate or terracotta pieces like this, again creating more topography, more spaces where the individual yabbies have to negotiate in order to find their fellow inhabitants. And so that provides the segregation that will help preserve the population. Now, next you can add tubes of varying diameters. The previous authors, or the authors that I've watched who have spoken about raising yabbies and crayfish, a lot of them have had just a series of tubes laid flat in one row on the bottom of a tank. And really these are more ornamental, because as I said, when you raise them like that, more than likely the population will diminish over time, and you cannot raise young to a large size in regards to that. So you can add these tubes of varying sizes. Obviously this is a bit long, but you can cut them. They don't need to be quite that long. So that will again provide more shelter, more homes for the varying and increasing sizes of yabbies or crayfish as they mature. Now just back to the bricks, you can have more pieces, or you can have entire pieces where the holes are intact there, again providing more habitat, more places for the yabbies to hide. Then on top of that, let's add something more significant. So here you'll see a pipe, PVC tube with hole saw cuts in it to create some holes, and on the other side, and if you can imagine this as a longer pipe which will extend from one end here and all the way to the other end there in the system, and inside which I put some shade cloth or netting, and they are folded in a concertina and then forced in there and tied on the ends with strings. Now what this creates is yet more habitat, more little hides, more areas for small yabbies to inhabit. They create some bigger ones for bigger yabbies to inhabit, and so this really significantly adds to the living space that the yabbies can have, and yet be separated from each other so that they're less likely to come in contact with each other and succumb to the cannibalistic activities of their fellows. If you have then 2 or 3 of these placed on top of the other features like the broken bricks and terracotta, that's going to add to your living space. So we're starting to raise up and come up in the water column, adding more living space and more segregation, and creating more compartments and more difficulty for one yabby to proceed to another place, and that's going to all help with the segregation. So suppose we had 2 or 3 of these down in the bottom, more of these pipes in between them, lots of topography, and now we're really going to go to the next step and add even more. And here you see what I've done with the shade cloth. I folded it backwards and forwards on itself to create a concertina, and then threaded string through the various folds, and in between I've cable tied more little pipes, adding to the number of possible hiding places and increasing the effective living area for many different members in the tank. Now if you can imagine, this is the bottom of the tank. You've got this sitting at the bottom, the pipes, the broken bricks, all of this creating an enormous amount of potential living spaces for the yabbies. The shade cloth not only provides the ability to separate the members of the tank, including all of these items here, the bricks, the terracotta, they provide additional surface area for bacterial colonization and the favorable bacteria that's going to help process all the waste, the nitrites, the ammonia. And so in this way I've been able to manage the waste in this tank without a separate biological filter system. So the plants do some of the work, and all the surface area and the beneficial bacteria in this are doing all of the work at the moment. Now you can tie the end of this via string to the top of the tank and have it raised up like this so that it uses the water column, or you can let these sit down the bottom and create the topography down the bottom. Obviously you don't want to totally overcrowd the bottom. And the next thing we have here is a professionally made marine hide, or a hide used. This is nothing new. It's probably used in crayfish farming all over the world. This is used for marine farming, and it's one that I've purchased with a float. And so this keeps the whole thing raised in the water column, and then creating even further habitat. So vertical living space, high-rise living space for the yabbies to inhabit. And you can tie this to the top of the tank if you want to, but the float will help keep it up. Now, with all these things in place, with the movement of the water, with the weight of the heavier yabbies or crayfish on these, they create an ever-changing, dynamic topography, a convoluted, labyrinthine environment offering physical separation from each other despite the spatial limitation of the tank. So in this way, hopefully we will be able to raise a reasonable number of yabbies or crayfish in a small space like this. So you can add additional features to these netting or shade cloth. So again, with these hides I've cable tied more tubes just to increase places where the yabbies can actually hide from each other. So initial results are quite promising, as you can see in that little part where I showed you the large yabbies cohabitating with the very juvenile yabbies, and the spatial separation is going to help us achieve hopefully the plan to grow enough yabbies actually to eat. And the second thing is, in a small yabby tank, if you've only got a couple of yabbies, you don't end up feeding them very much. It's more ornamental, and you can't get the waste and the nitrates produced that will run an aquaponics system either. So really you cannot really use yabbies and crayfish successfully in an aquaponics system unless you increase their density, population density, to create more waste to feed your plants. Right, please follow and like if you want to see how this experiment progresses. In about 6 to 12 months I'm going to have a look at them again. Obviously I'm going to tend to them in between and see if anything exciting eventuates. See you again next time.